Lopez wants it away.
And it's hit deep to left center. Andrew Jones on the run. This one has a chance. Home run! Mike Piazza and the Mets lead 3-2. Bartolo has done it! The impossible has happened! This is one of the great moments in the history of baseball.
Ladies and gentlemen, Mets fans of all ages, here is your host, Nick Durst. Hello, Mets fans. Welcome back to another edition of Bleav in the Mets right here on the Bleav Podcasting Network or on the Bleav in the Mets YouTube channel. I'm your host, Nick Durst, and there's Mets news every week, even though there's really not much news. They're making trades, they're dumping minor leaguers for cash, or they're acquiring minor leaguers, or they're signing minor leaguers. But this week, David Stearns made some comments about why he thinks this Mets team is going to be good this year. I personally don't see it. I don't understand how we can think the Mets are going to compete for a playoff spot this year. I would say at best, they're the ninth best team in the NL on paper going into this season. And joining me now to discuss that and more happenings in the Mets world, he's the co-host of the award-nominated You Know I'm Right podcast, and he is Joe Calabrese. Joe, welcome into the show. You Know I'm Right podcast. Top two podcasts in the world, obviously, with this one. And nominated for the best sports business podcast, the best sports comedy podcast for the sports podcasting group. Tell everybody where they can go to send some support and vote for the You Know I'm Right podcast to win the awards.
Got to visit our podcast channels, YKIR Podcast, on Twitter, X, on Instagram. You'll find links. Also follow Sports Podcast Group. You'll be able to find them. Yes, we were nominated for Best Sports Business Podcast, Best Sports Comedy Podcast. Who knew we were funny? That's amazing. What an accomplishment in itself. Happy to be back, pal.
Yeah, great interview with Mackenzie Mitchell out this week. But we're talking Mets here, of course, Joe. And David Stearns is clear about the Mets 2024 expectations. He said, and we quote, "We should be competing for a playoff spot." I can't even get through the sentence without laughing. Sure. I can't see it. I don't see it.
Let's politely say they're the fourth best team in their division. Would you agree with that? Heading into
well, I'm not sure how the Marlins are going to do this year with the changes, but yeah, I would say fourth. They could be fifth. Everything needs to break perfectly for the Mets to be a playoff team. You need to have Luis Severino has to be an all-star. He has to lower his ERA from last year by 4 points. Sean Manaea, who spent most of the year in the bullpen, he needs to be an all-star. He needs to lower his ERA by 3 points. Adrian Hauser, he needs to not be in the rotation. He needs to be in the bullpen. But if he is in the rotation, which he's going to be, he needs to lower his ERA by 2.5 points. Tyler McGill, if he's in the rotation, he needs to, be that guy that he was in 2022 to start the season, not get injured, and have a 3 ERA. The bullpen, they signed a bunch of guys who have stunk in their careers. They only have career years. And they need to have Mark Vientos be an all-star at DH, DJ Stewart be an all-star DH. Brett Baty needs to have an all-star type season at third base. And they need to play great defense. Harrison Bader needs to play over 100 games, and he has to bat 280 and have 20 home runs. So, Joe, if all those things happen, I think the Mets then have a good shot to make the playoffs. What do you think?
Oh, I totally agree. All right, we're done here. Take care, guys.
Mets over under, I think, was at 80. Came out at 80. I would take the under if that's what the under that is the total right now. I can't see them winning more than 75, 76 games with this team.
Absolutely not. My first instinct is based on what I've seen David Stearns do so far. I think the expectation is that we are looking to overachieve a little bit, and come deadline time, they're not going to be buyers. I don't think there's going to be anybody you can buy to add to this team that's going to get them to 90 to 95 wins and get them into the playoffs unless they really, really, really overachieve. So your best case scenario is you're looking to sell. And at that point, who are you looking to sell?
Hopefully Sean Manaea.
Maybe a Starling Marte, right?
Montana.
Maybe they're starting to think about selling a guy like Jeff McNeil. Like they could get a lot for him. So there's
Well,
no shot that they make the playoffs.
there's
No
three.
shot.
There's three guys they might trade. I'll talk about that right now with you. McNeil, I think they'd like to maybe trade. I think he's gonna have a bounce back here. I
I
think
think so too. But I think his
David
value is very,
Stearns,
very high.
he's not a fan of Brandon Nimmo for some reason.
No.
This guy, top 3, top 4 center fielder in Major League Baseball. Very consistent every year. He's going to bat around 300. He's going to be on base. He's going to walk hard. He's going to play great defense. Stearns non-committal about Brandon Nimmo playing every day this year. They just signed the guy to a 2-year deal.
I saw that. Yeah.
Harrison Bader will be on the injured list by May. What do you think? May? And Nimmo will be back in center field. So I think Stearns would love to trade Nimmo if possible. And then I know that when the Mets are out of it come July, they come back, they get blown out by the Phillies in Great Britain. Everything's looking bleak. David Stearns, he's going to be on the phones, and he is going to be trading the face of the franchise, Pete Alonso, and it's going to be a very dark, sad day for the New York Mets.
I still think that Alonso will be here for the long term. I think he wants to be a Met. I think he wants to see the process through.
You think he's going to want to be a Met if they are bad this year and he doesn't like Carlos Mendoza's managing style?
I don't know if they're going to be bad. I just don't think they're going to be good.
So what is that? Well, I mean, if they're under 500, that's not good. That's just bad.
I think they'll stay 5 under, 6 under.
Right, so you got them like 77, 78 wins.
Yeah, I can't see them being more than like 10 to 15 games on there. There are too many teams that are worse than them.
I think they can maybe finish like 20, 30 games out of first place.
Oh, I mean, the Braves are going to win 100 games. The Phillies are probably going to win 95 games. And again, the Marlins are the mixed bag in the group. They could finish with 85 to 90 wins. They could finish with 75 wins. You really don't know.
So what do you think about those guys I said? Who do you think is most likely to get traded of those 3 core players? I would say the Mets core players.
So who are we talking about? Nimmo,
McNeil, and Alonso.
I think the most likely to get traded would be Nimmo, simply because I think you're right. I think
7 years left in the deal, though. That's tough to trade.
It's very, very tough to trade, but I look at Nimmo.
David Stearns like Brandon Nimmo?
I don't know.
Does he smile too much? Stearns wants to be the one that smiles the most?
I think the biggest problem is I think Nimmo is a good player. I think the second half of that contract is going to be very hit or miss. There's going to be, because he's 31 now. So if you're looking at it from that perspective, you're hoping the first 3 or 4 years are good. You're hoping he's good this year because then you can parlay.
He'll be 31 this year.
Right. You're hoping that you can parlay what he's done the last year and a half to 2 seasons and you could trade that money away. I think their biggest asset is probably McNeil because I think he plays multiple positions. He's a former batting champ, consistent player. The money is good. Like there are going to be contenders who are going to come calling at the deadline. I think you can get immediately 2 really good.
That could be, if it's Nimmo traded or McNeil, that could be the Steve Cohen effect again, where you're keeping the salary to get better prospects.
Right.
What do you think there?
Yeah, sure, I agree. I don't think they're in the business of holding. I don't think they're in the business of eating too much money at this point, because I don't think like. With Verlander and Scherzer, obviously it was different, but those were also short-term contracts. So for to eat the money now, because the Scherzer money I think is this year, and then I think Verlander is either another year or 2 after this. So in terms of having those
year, and then Verlander is this year, next year.
Okay. So in terms of having extra money on the books, that doesn't really look so bad. Yeah, it seems to me like Stearns wants this year to be a transitional year. He
wants to evaluate the players he's inherited. He's going to shake things up in the offseason, I think, or at the trade deadline. Yeah. And then you have to hope as a Mets fan, there's a big free agent class next year. They got to go for it. They got to be.
That's what I think.
They have to get a Soto. They have to get another offensive player, most likely. They have to sign at least 2 of Corbin Burns, Zach Wheeler, those type of guys. They got to be playing.
You bring Zach Wheeler back after trading him.
They should. He'd be great.
Awesome.
Zach Wheeler has been one of the best pitchers in baseball in the last 5 years.
And they have a lot of money coming off the books. They won't be on the hook for the Scherzer money next year. I think, like I told you at the top, I think they're going to be looking to move Starling Marte. I think it's possible Jeff McNeil is going to get traded because his money's very palpable. So between the assets that you get back in whatever 2 or 3 trades they plan on making, because I think they're going to be sellers at the deadline, in addition to all the money that's coming off the books, and we know you have an owner now that who's willing to spend, I think Stearns right this season is playing with house money, because if they're good, then they're probably going to be better than your expectations.
Overachieving. But
Overachievers.
If they're 500 at the deadline,
they're still
not going
selling.
to go for it. They're more likely to sell still.
They are 1,000% selling. But again, it's for next season, and they're going to have a lot of money to play with. They have an owner who's willing to spend. I know you don't want to hear it, but they do have assets who are going to be sought after at the deadline. So they're going to be in the mix.
Well, if Marte plays good, maybe they could trade him. McNeil, same thing. But if those guys are playing good, that means the team is probably doing pretty good. Right. Except the pitching is going to be questionable. Like I said in last week's episode with Tim Britton, I said the best case scenario for the Sean Manaea trade is they trade him. I mean, the best case scenario for the signing of Sean Manaea is they trade him at the deadline for a reliever.
That's what I think they're going to look to do with Severino too. If Severino,
Manaea,
I think he can have a bounce back season. And as a Yankees fan,
maybe the Yankees will need Severino at the deadline. The Mets could trade.
It's very possible. He was never the same player since the injury, but he's only on a 1-year contract. If he's got a good record and his ERA is 3.5, 3.7, right? If it's hovering in that range, that's right around 4, right below 4, he'll have some value. You'll be able to get something for him at the deadline. So I think you're looking at a scenario where the Mets will probably flip 3, 4, 5 players at the deadline, get prospects for them, good prospects.
That's
prospects
just what
are on the cusp of the majors. What?
That's just what us fans want to hear. This season, I don't care. They punted on this season last year. At the deadline, they said,
but they have to, because
they could have easily.
What would you have done? They're not better than the Braves, and they're not better than the Phillies.
What was what I would have done, Joe? I would have kept Justin Verlander.
Okay.
And I would have went for it this season.
This year. Okay.
You could have signed players. You could get Matt Chapman. You can get Jorge Soler, Rice Hoskins, JD Martinez, Justin Turner, or are they going to get none of those guys, Joe? Do you think any of these guys are going to sign with the Mets to be the DH?
I think they're good players. I just don't think they're difference makers for you guys this year.
So because they're not going for it, because they're looking to lose. So none of these.
If you were to get 2 or 3 of those players, then it's different.
I think
one doesn't make a difference.
If you put Rice Hoskins in the lineup right after Alonso, that would be tremendous.
Makes the lineup better, sure.
Runs for him. I would want him. That's the
you
guy
go from a team that's going to win 78 games to a team that wins 84.
Well, this is me saying if they kept Verlander, if they brought back David Robertson, the Mets maybe. I spoke with Anthony McCarron on this show. They might have kicked punted last season too early, because they only finished a few games behind the Diamondbacks with a terrible roster they had in the second half, and the Diamondbacks went to the World Series. Right. So is it plausible that if they kept Verlander, if they kept Robertson, that maybe they could have won 3-4 extra games and made the playoffs?
They were hovering there. Yeah.
I think so. Again, they didn't have the offense. Billy Epler, he was dead set on Daniel Vogelbach has to play, and that cost them. When they could have JD Martinez last year, they could have Justin Turner last year. So the Mets, none of these guys are going to be the DH. The Mets said they have $10 million off to spend to look in the bullpen. The Mets need about 5 relievers, if I'm being honest, if they want to be a competitive team this year. Their bullpen is worse than last year. They're getting Edwin Diaz back. They were going into last season with Edwin Diaz. The bullpen wasn't good. The Diaz is back. How are they getting him the ball with the lead, Joe? How are they getting him the ball with the lead? The starters, other than Senga and Katana, they all stink. So after
David Robertson was a miracle worker last year.
And then the 6th, 7th, 8th inning, nobody can get outs. And then you get Diaz he'll be fine. He's not gonna have that many saves.
He'll have 35 saves on a team that wins again 78 games. David Robertson was truly a miracle worker last year. He was awesome. And he wasn't even spectacular because he kind of faded.
Sign David Robertson, sign Colin McHugh. Right. And take it from there. You get the 1-year deals. If you want to be competitive, you got to show some signs that you're going to be competing for a playoff spot. I'm not saying go sign Josh Hader like you should, or go get a Blake Snell. I'm saying go sign these two veteran relievers on 1-year deals and solidify the 7th and 8th inning. And maybe you could win a few games by getting the ball to Diaz. I think, Joe, if we're looking at the NL, the Mets probably, remember, top 6 teams make it. I would say they're probably around the 9th best team in the NL. If we
Sure,
went
they're
through
middle
it.
of the pack. That's why I said
Dodgers.
they're not a bad team, but they're not good. That's the
Dodgers
problem.
are the best with the Braves
Yes.
and the Phillies.
Yes.
And the Brewers,
Brewers
they're
will be
probably
better.
going to miss the playoffs. But
I
you know,
think
there's
the Cardinals will be better this year than they were last year.
Cardinals,
I think
Cubs, the
Cubs
Reds,
will-
the Diamondbacks, the Giants are better.
That then right there, the Mets are 10. So
All right, and the Padres, I don't know. I think the Brewers are going to take a step back. I would say lose counsel, but the Cubs are going to take a step forward. So, yeah, I think they're right there around 9. You mentioned the Marlins. They won the playoffs last year. So I'm going to say the Mets are around the 9th best team in the National League, and that's not going to be competing for a playoff spot. I don't think, unless one of these teams has a choke job like the Mets did last year.
No, I don't think so. But I think the Mets will, up until June or July, they'll be hovering, and they'll be in that spot where you come to me and they say, if they win 5 and 6, 6 and 7, but it's not going to happen.
Joe, what did I tell you when we were leaving the wild card game, Game 3 in
That's
2022?
You're done. You were done.
2000,
You were done then.
I knew last season was going to be a disaster because they did not
You
add
knew in your
the
heart.
offense. I didn't go to a game last year. You think I'm going to a game this year?
No, you're still on a boycott.
The boycott's going to continue.
The great boycott that started in 2022.
And maybe I'll be back in 2025 if they make some big free agent signings, but I don't know. I don't know if they're going to be in on Juan Soto. I thought they were going to be on Aaron Judge last year. I thought they're going to be in on Ohtani this year. They weren't.
No.
So nothing has shown me so far they're going to be going for these big ticket items. And Juan Soto, John, is he really going to want to play in New York long term? Because remember, last year in San Diego, he was off to an awful start in April.
Right.
So he was Juan Soto.
So.
And the Padres fans, they didn't really mind. In the Bronx, if he's batting 220 in May, he's going to get booed. He's going to get booed. Is he going to want to deal with that long term? I don't know. I think the fact that Juan Soto's playing in New York this year actually hurts the Mets and the Yankees long term without signing him.
I think he's so tailor-made for Yankee Stadium that even if he's hitting 220, he's going to figure out a way and may to have 15 or 20 home runs.
But he's going to get booed. Stan got booed. Aaron Judge got booed.
Yeah, but the thing about Stan is Stan's not good if he's not playing the field and all that stuff. I think Soto will be locked in to some degree. I can't see him starting any worse than he did last year.
He finished fine, but
he's arguably to start a better lineup.
Is he going to be able to tolerate getting booed? Is this going to be where he wants to be long term with the boots?
No, but I don't know if he's going to hit 220. I don't know. He's going to probably be a 260 hitter. If we're talking mid to the end of May, he's going to have at least 10 to 15 home runs by that point. I think he'll be fine. I think Stan is more likely to get booed, especially if he doesn't start that well again.
Well, Stan's a professional. He's able to handle New York. He's locked in the long term. I just don't know if Soto, he's going to like playing in New York if things go south. And we'll see what happens next offseason. Maybe, you know what? I'm going to say it. Maybe Juan Soto's going to be a Dodger next year. The Dodgers are going to clear some space.
Terrible. It's terrible for baseball.
It would be, but
I don't even care if we're making jokes about them.
Mookie Betts is playing second base now. Jason Hayward's on a 1-year deal in right field.
Right.
And Teoscar Hernandez, I think they got as well.
It's so bad because even if they get bounced in the divisional round like they always do, having one team with that bloat of a payroll, getting all the stars and what they did with the Ohtani contract, deferring money, it's like you're working around all these loopholes. Like, what is the point? At some point, the competitive balance overall is going to be disrupted. You're kind of seeing it now, even though Texas and Arizona were just in the World Series and did pretty good figures and sold postseason tickets and their stadiums were filled. It's like the bottom 10 will check out. You know what I mean?
Well, who do you think's more likely to choke this October, the Dodgers or the Braves?
The Dodgers.
Really? Okay.
Yeah. Who's won? Well, I mean, they both won championships more recently, but the Braves have won a legitimate
They won back-to-back years.
I could see the Braves having less of problems navigating through October than the Dodgers. I also trust. I don't trust Dave Roberts in postseason series. I think he overmanages. You know that.
No. This might be the Cincinnati Reds year. We'll see.
Right.
But if you're David Stearns, you got to hope that it's going to be your year. You couldn't get Craig Counsell, so you hired Mendoza, and that sucked for Buck Showalter. I can't say that I think the Mets are in a better position with Carlos Mendoza for this season than Buck Showalter, first-time manager. We'll see how that shakes out. I hope David Stearns right when he says that the Mets should be competing for a playoff spot. I just don't see it happening. But this is going to do it here for Bleav in the Mets. We got to hope that we can Bleav in the Mets. Joe, let everybody know where they can find you and the You Know I'm Right podcast as well.
Again, find us YKIR podcast or UNRI podcast on all podcast platforms. Again, award nominated Best Sports Business by Sports Podcast Group now for the third straight year. Hopefully we win this year. Hopefully we don't lose to another one-year wonder like certain people who I'm not going to mention. But Best Sports Business Podcast, third straight year. Best Sports Comedy Podcast, because you and I are just absolutely hysterical. You can find me, J Calabrese 1 on Twitter, X, Joey Cals elsewhere. This was a lot of fun. I have a vested interest in the Mets this year because of the former Yankees there. I hope Severino has a bounce back season. I think he will. I think he'll be an asset for you guys up until he's traded right around the trade deadline. Bader, I liked him last year. I don't know why he got designated, but that's a whole nother thing. Sure, he's a platoon player, but he's good when he plays. So hopefully he's good as a Mets.
For the Mets.
But yeah, no, so I have a vested interest because I want to see the former Yankees do well there this year.
Carlos Mendoza, the biggest former Yankee of them all.
The biggest. Listen, if you wanted David Stearns, right? Everybody had wanted David Stearns for a while. You and I, a couple months ago, we basically pegged him as the next guy in line. Sure enough, that's exactly what happened. So he's the guy you wanted. Now you got to wait 2 years to see what he does. Can't complain about what he does right now when we're not even into year one of his tenure. So let's give him some time. But I do think you're right. This is a transitional year. I think there's going to be a lot of selling at the deadline. But I think there is a long-term plan in mind. 2020 next year, next offseason, there are going to be a lot of stars on the market, and the Mets are going to have a lot of money to spend, and they have the owner now who's going to be willing to spend the money. So let's see what happens this year. But I think this year will be better than last year. That is my prediction.
Better than last year. Wow. All right. So maybe by a game. We'll see how it happens. All right. That's going to do it for this episode of Bleav in the Mets. Make sure you're following Bleav in the Mets on all social media platforms and, of course, on YouTube. Like and subscribe at BleavintheMets. I'm on X, aka Twitter, at Nick_Durst, and I am on Instagram at Nick's Food and Stuff. And until next time, everybody, let's hope for the best and let's go Mets.